It is Tuesday, January 25th, and I thought I would talk about this painting over here and start a web vlog, whatever they're called. Um, I made this painting yesterday, and I wanted to share my artistic process a little bit with uh, with anybody who might be interested. And basically, I started it by working from a photo that I found on the web. Now, that's kind of an interesting idea that some of the things that artists today really struggle with is working a lot with photography and also with finding reference material. And I've been actually approached several times um, by people who have been upset or angry with the idea that I've used their photographs to make paintings. But I've also had many more, like I'd say 98% of the people who know that I've used their photograph from social media to make a painting have been kind of happy about it. So lately, what I've been doing is I've been asking photographers, when I can find them, who work with the male figure, to allow me to use their images, and in return what I'll either do is I will send them a painting or two, or make them a portrait, or I'll offer to pay them. And I've gotten some very nice responses from that, and this painting is actually from something I found on the web. So to start with, I wanted to talk about this painting because I was kind of proud of it from a couple of points of view, especially what someone might refer to as a formal point of view. And the formal point of view has to do with how it looks, the texture, the color, the rendering, the drawing. I initially, in 2021, just before this month, before the end of the year, I did a series of just quick drawings that I do actually from the screen while I'm watching television in the evenings to see if they'll work out as paintings. And I thought that this one was pretty good. And here's the photograph on my screen that I started working from. So what I often do is I take parts of photographs and cut down or crop down on them for a better composition, because I felt like this composition for the initial photograph was very symmetrical and uninteresting. And so what I decided to do was to do something where I placed the head slightly off center and played around with things like texture, line quality, the shading a little bit, and also to caricature the figure a little bit. And you can see in the drawing is actually a little different than the painting and the photograph are, because I'm not a machine. I don't portray things exactly as they're in the photograph. Um, Basically that's human error more than anything else. It's inability in terms of drawing, even though I draw pretty well. So some of the things about the painting that I really like, that I hope that you'll pay attention to, are the thick and the thin of the paint. I've worked a lot with trying to layer the painting up, and also there are some little details that I think are worth looking at, which have to do with texture in the beard, where I've used a variety of textures and then went back through it with a pencil and scraped in some stubble. Um, the uh, the ski cap is also, or beanie, is also something that I thought would be kind of a cool thing to play around with. So if you look closely at some of the details in it, you'll see that there is a layering of the color and of the texture on top of it. And what I tried to do was actually indicate some of the textures that happen with the weave of the hat. In the foreground, the face is handled a lot differently than the jacket or the background. So what I try to do is have a variety of mark making when I'm working with the image as well, and a variety of textures with the paint strokes. So I think of the paintbrush as sort of almost like a calligraphy pen. And so the face and the jacket itself are mainly done with thin washes and then laid on top with thicker, what are called impastos of paint. And in the background, I applied literally with plastering knives. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll pre-mix the colors before I even begin painting. And so I have a variety of colors and paint on my palette that I used yesterday to make the painting. Now, the other thing about the painting and the subject matter, which I think is sort of relevant, is that I paint mainly beautiful men, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're heteronormative beautiful men. They are often men who are not considered standard beauties. In this case, he's probably closer to what normal or average or media would promote as a handsome guy. But I really liked the fact that his beard was going gray, that he was showing his age a little bit, that he was dressed in a sort of rugged way. And I thought that if I put him off center a little bit, that might make the image a little bit more interesting. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you also on my screen is how I often work the process of looking through the image and sort of breaking it down into something that's more usable. So the first image that I showed you was the image that was unedited. And often what I start with is I blow it up, and I will sometimes use a grid. In this instance, I just drew it freehand. But I'll use Photoshop to make a grid a lot of the time, and also to get the composition right. So if I show you the grid on here, you'll see that the head is off center, and that a lot of the visual weight of the image is in the upper left-hand corner of the canvas, this sort of quarter of the canvas, which I think makes for a more interesting composition, and also makes it sort of flow all the way down to his shoulder and off of the canvas. And the other thing I like to do is often I like to have parts of the figure kiss or overlap the edges of the painting's edge as well. The other thing that I do with Photoshop is I provide myself with various ways of looking at it. Now, the color on this version, which is the original version, is actually really browned out or sepia toned out, and it doesn't have a lot of pinks or oranges in the flesh tones. And so what I did was I ran an auto color correct on a layer of it, and that auto color correct shows a slightly more accurate to life view where the highlights are cooler lights, whereas the shadows are in a darker tone, and that kind of matches up with what I was trying to do with mixing the oil paint. The other thing that I'll often do is I will run something called Smart Blur on it, so that it'll break it up into the big masses, and I can see what the big masses of light and shadow are in Smart Blur. And you can see it really does change the image quite a lot and chunks it into sort of a posterized version of it that I'll often start with. And the other thing is, most of my painting, I pre-mix the colors and I work from a sort of idea of what I think the color should look like rather than what's in the photograph, because digital photos are kind of bad about color. And in this instance, I also desaturated the photo, turned it into a black and white, and also ran it as a smart blur to start the painting. So when I actually began drawing and painting this was the version that I started with, and then I worked my way through to the color version, and then to the color corrected version, and then back to the black and white version again, and then to the original version, and compared the two. So I just wanted to share some of the ideas that I had about how I paint and what the subject matter is, and just start sort of a visual blog of what I'm doing every day in the studio, because I've noticed that I have some followers who have written to me and said, you haven't produced a video in a while, and I thought it might be nice to do that. Thank you.